What is the point?
All right, stinger time.
Ew.
Hi. We're here.
Hi.
Hi.
We are here.
Another deep dive coming your way.
What a day. What
Kapow.
a glorious day. Mad Max.
Oh, a great movie, might I add. Great movie.
Yeah, there's several of them. Actually, I haven't seen the most recent one, Furiosa.
It's good. I saw it on the plane. Whenever I travel, I use that as an excuse to catch up on movies that I just don't have time to watch in my normal life. And so I watched it on a plane. It was fantastic. In fact, I recommend people should look up the behind the scenes of Mad Max Fury Road and Furiosa, because the whole story of how long it took to get those movies made is truly, it's just one of those things where it's like, that took over a decade to make. That's a lot of commitment to
Look at you
give to a movie.
Having knowledge in pop culture.
I like watching very random like YouTube videos about random things. And one day it was like the true story of Mad Max Fury Road. I'm like, oh, I love behind the scenes stuff. So I watched it. Long story short, it took the guy, what's his name? Was it George Miller? It took him like 10 years to make that movie because of all the roadblocks and obstacles and funding challenges and writing challenges. But ultimately it came out great. It's a fantastic piece of film to watch.
Nice. I mean, Fury Road was pretty great.
Fantastic.
Speaking of Fury Road,
what a segue!
If you're listening to this on podcast and are not on YouTube, you are missing out on our graphic that says "Too Fast, 2 Corinthians."
It is our thumbnail guy Alden. Shout out to him. He is very creative with the thumbnails, and sometimes he's almost too creative. I'm like, bro, no one will get this reference. But he dropped that one, and you were like, April, you were like, that's fantastic. And then I was like, yeah,
I
we
actually
have to.
love this.
We
please,
have to.
I was like, please, Tim. We have to do this. I know it's a pun. I know typically for the algorithm, puns are not the best, but I love a good pun.
We had to.
2 Fast, 2 Corinthians, because today we are talking about Jerry Falwell Jr.
Dun, dun,
So
dun,
in a way, this is kind of, I guess it could be a part 2-ish, because last week we talked about Jerry Falwell Sr. But Jerry Falwell Jr. stands alone. He is his own man. He's got his own story, and it is a story.
He's his own independent, picking himself up by the bootstraps kind of man.
Right. So he is, I don't really know what all he's doing right now. I feel like maybe real estate. I feel like that's what everybody does once they resign from a scandal. But yeah, he's still married to Becky, his wife. And that will be interesting, based on what we say in this episode.
That's his wife right there.
Yeah. And a lot of the story with him, outside of his endorsement of Trump, which we will get into, is a little he said, she said, because there are conflicting narratives depending on who you talk to. So keep all of that in mind as we...
I feel like these past 2 episodes we're doing like the Falwell legacy.
Yeah.
Arguably, I think that the Falwell name is the most influential name in politics that has given us the moral majority, right? I mean, we covered Jerry Falwell Sr. and how influential him and Paul Weyrich were to create the moral majority that galvanized white evangelicals that essentially gave us Trump. And Jerry Falwell Jr. is another key piece in that legacy that gave us Trump. I mean, we say without Paul the White, there would be no Trump. And I think between Paul the White and Jerry Falwell Jr., Trump would not have the kind of support that he had among white Christians in particular.
Well, Paula White, I think, brought over charismatics and Pentecostals with her influence there. And possibly even some people of color, because she ran in those circles. She had a show on Black Entertainment, like BET sometimes. Where Jerry Falwell, I think, brings in your more Baptists and you're kind of more not so crazy.
This goes back to...
And I can say crazy because I was Pentecostal.
You're allowed.
No offense.
This goes back to when we had Matthew Taylor back on the show a few weeks ago, and we were talking about like his quadrant of Christianity, and he was talking about how the independent charismatic world was always kind of seen as like the fringe of evangelicalism, and you have this like this denominational evangelicalism that's kind of proper and prim and like, you know, is institutionalized, and Jerry Falwell Jr. kind of brings those people into the foray, right? I think he's the person who brought the more, well, I would never be a charismatic because my theology is too proper kind of vibe into the Trump ethos.
Yeah, and I think the fact that he was president of a, you know, pretty respected university, Liberty University. It's a D1 NCAA school. It's accredited, which some Christian colleges are not.
Some are not. So
you know, so he did kind of bring this more established, respectable side of evangelicalism to the Trump train. But before we get into that, let's do a little bit of background on Jerry Falwell Jr. Just some quick biography. He was
some
born.
Need to knows.
Yeah, he was born in 1962. He was the oldest of 3 children, so he's an older child. And I don't know if you fall in like believe the like older child, middle child, younger child.
Yeah, I'm a firstborn to a T.
I'm also a firstborn to it. Yeah, so, you know, keep that in mind. So he's the oldest of 3 children. His sister is the middle child, Jenny. We don't really hear much about her. And then Jonathan is the youngest. And Jonathan is the current chancellor at Liberty University. And he took over his dad's church, Thomas Road Baptist Church. So he's still the pastor there. It was interesting. So I read an interview that Jerry Jr. did with Vanity Fair, and he was very candid about his upbringing with, obviously his dad is Jerry Falwell.
Right.
Jerry Falwell Sr. You know, and I could imagine what it would be like to grow up with Jerry Falwell being your dad, because I grew up, my dad was a Pentecostal preacher, and there's you know, I don't know how to explain. I feel like unless you've been a preacher's kid, it's you don't fully understand. Like there's just a lot of pressure that is built into being born to parents who are well respected in a religious setting.
Yeah.
Because then you're also expected to, like, everyone's just looking at you. It's easy for people to start rumors about you. I remember when I was in college, I was commuting on Sunday mornings to go to my dad's church because I was being supportive of my dad's church. But my college was like an hour and a half away. So I would wake up at like the crack of dawn to drive an hour and a half so that I could help set up my dad's church, because we were just renting a place. So we had to set up and tear down every Sunday. I remember there was a lady on our worship team who literally started a rumor that the reason I was so tired on Sunday mornings is because I was out partying late at night on Saturdays. Which I was not, but I was tired. Anyway, so like you just have to deal with that kind of stuff. And like I remember my parents, there would be like my parents were okay with like going to the movie theater, but there were certain theaters we would not go to because it was closer to the church, and there were some people in the church that thought going to the movie theater was a sin, and we didn't want them to see us going to the movie theater. So there were things that I could and could not do, not necessarily because my parents thought it was wrong. But because of what other people would think about it.
Sarah, my partner, grew up PK, and again, I don't have that experience, but the stories that she shares are very similar to what you've said. And there are moments where she's like, I think I feel this way because growing up at PK, I had that feeling, and now I'm feeling it again in our marriage now over something completely unrelated to that, of course, you know. So there definitely is something that kind of carries over into life beyond just being a pastor's kid, I think.
Yeah, I think I also tend to care what people think about me a little more maybe than normal. I mean, a lot of that could also just be like being female and evangelicalism.
Sure.
And
yeah.
But anyway, so I just think it's important to know that Jerry Falwell Jr. grew up with Jerry Falwell Sr. being his dad. And Jerry Falwell, as we discussed last week, his public persona came across very harsh and judgmental. But when you hear
because it was, to be clear.
Yes, because it was. When you hear Jerry talk about his dad, he actually talks about his mom, Maisel, being the more strict, judgmental one, and that his dad was actually pretty relaxed when it came to, Jerry Jr. getting in trouble, because it does sound like he was a bit of a rebel. He said his dad was not as strict as his mom. He claims that he became a true Christian in college when he went to Liberty. So Junior went to Liberty. He majored in religious studies because he wanted to decide what he really believed. And then in 1984, he went to law school at the University of Virginia, and he talks about it as kind of wanting to go into a more secular environment because he wanted to get away from the fundamental evangelical world. And it does seem like he just wasn't a fan of a lot of the rules. And Liberty University is known for having quite a few rules, as most Christian colleges are. And he talked about how when he went to University of Virginia, it was his first time away from home. And he did not join a church while he was there.
Oh, and cardinal sin.
I know. And if religion ever came up, he would be quick to say, that's not me, that's my dad.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. So during his second year of law school, he went home to visit his family. And that's when he first meets Becky. Or not when he first meets Becky, but when they started, like, kind of, he met her when she was a lot younger, but went back. And that's when they kind of developed a romance. He was 23 and she was 18 at the time. And he says, interestingly, that his mom did not approve of Becky's family. Now, this is according to Jerry Jr. He says that his mom thought they were, I think, said something around them being kind of like hillbillies from North Carolina.
Like Hicks almost? Something like
that. But his dad approved and loved Becky. And then he noted, too, that later his mom approved of Becky, too.
Okay. All right. Noted.
He claimed that his dad was only puritanical because of his mom, and that his dad didn't actually judge people.
Well, I mean, that's not super true, considering his dad preached sermons about how Brown v. Board of Education was a mistake. I mean, talk about judging people. He was on the record talking about MLK Jr. and how he doesn't deserve a holiday. I don't know. I mean, maybe there is this like duality of like this public persona that Jerry Falwell represented, and then behind the scenes he was much more kind and loving to his own family and and his son. That's very possible. But I mean, dude, the guy's on the record saying some crazy stuff about the gays and the ACLU, and no matter what, either way, his words had a lot of impact that hurt a lot of people. There's just no way around that.
Yeah, and because I mean, and I think last week too, I said Jerry Falwell Sr. seemed to be like a true believer. Like he actually believed what he preached, because he didn't have any scandals. He seemed to, practice what he preached as well. And his message relatively stayed consistent his entire, ministry career. So it's interesting seeing this side of what Jerry Jr. says growing up in that house, where his dad seemed to be more relaxed behind closed doors.
Just how relaxed was he, April? According to Jerry.
Well, so you actually brought up that Jerry Falwell Sr. would drink a lot of NyQuil because he was against alcohol, because drinking alcohol was a sin, but he'd drink NyQuil to kind of get that same effect. And while I was researching Jerry Jr., realized that actually came from a quote from Jerry Jr. in this article, in this Vanity Fair interview.
Vindication.
He said, quote, sometimes he would drink a whole bottle of NyQuil. He called it Baptist wine.
Wow.
So I don't know. I mean, this is coming from the Sun.
I don't know why you would lie about that. I mean, it's you never know. But listen, I'll put it this way: that would fall in line with the perspective from a lot of us that are a lot of our religious leaders that we knew were not the same people on and off the platform, right? I think that there is this sense of like, I'm this person representing these values, but behind the scenes, I actually don't believe many of them, but they're lucrative and they give me power and they give me, a platform I can say this stuff on. I mean, we see this all the time with Republicans and their sex scandals. What was it? The Moms of Liberty. People who were talking about how the queers were grooming kids is engaging in threesomes with her husband and another woman. It's like there is this major dichotomy often between what people will say on stage and say publicly and the values that they'll fight for versus their own personal and life behind closed doors.
Well, and Jerry Falwell Sr., to me, the fact that if what his son said is true, the fact that he would drink NyQuil to get the feeling of what alcohol would do instead of just drinking alcohol,
right,
shows to me that he was still trying to follow, like, he still believed those rules, but he was finding ways around it, which is just like wild to me. Like, I feel like it would just be way better for everybody if you just drank the wine, drink the wine.
It's
Don't
like
drink the NyQuil.
It's like when people say I was a virgin when I got married, and then I say me too, technically. Like you try and find all these loopholes, right? You don't have to
call me out, Tim.
But not you. No, I'm calling out me. Like I'm just saying,
no, I know.
We do this all the time, right? Where it's
find
like, well,
the loopholes.
How?
Like, I mean, yes, I'm technically a virgin. I signed my purity pledge card, but the Bible doesn't say anything about hand stuff.
Right? Exactly. So Baptist wine, that's all. That's all it is.
Yeah.
The Bible talks about alcohol, but it does not say do not be drunk via NyQuil. So it's okay.
Yeah. It does sound like, according to Jerry Jr., that him and his dad were pretty close, and he did not get along as well with his mom because his mom was the more rule follower and the enforcer, it seemed like. And he's acted like she wasn't a big fan of the fame and the fancy lifestyle that came with, being so well known as Jerry Falwell, her husband, was, that she just kind of wanted a quiet small town preacher's life, but did not get that because his, Jerry Falwell became such a force in this world. So in 1988, though, Liberty was on the brink of bankruptcy and Jerry Falwell Sr. brought in Jerry Falwell Jr. to kind of help pull this along. And so he started working for Liberty. He said during this time, he would eat alone in a Wendy's parking lot listening to Rush Limbaugh. And he says that it's one of the main reasons that he became conservative, was listening to Rush Limbaugh.
We got to do at some point a deep dive on Rush Limbaugh, because people don't understand how he was the foundation for the right-wing media sphere that we are experiencing today. I mean, I grew up on Rush Limbaugh too. I listened to him almost every day working with my dad in construction. And like, this dude is pivotal for how we got to the point that we're at. So I have to mark that down somewhere, but deep dive on Rush Limbaugh is needed at some point on this show.
Yeah, dude, put a pin in it.
Put a pin in it.
Yeah. So in 2007, Jerry Falwell Sr. dies. And so Jerry Jr. was in the succession plan. So he becomes the chancellor and the president of Liberty University. And they credit him for rescuing Liberty from bankruptcy and transformed the nonprofit university into a financial powerhouse with more than 100,000 students and a $1.7 billion endowment. Because he was more of a businessman, and he's always said that that's kind of more his lane, is he wants to run the business side of things. His brother
is the pastor, right? He's the business guy. That's kind of the dynamic here. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Jerry, in 2015, now this is when we're going to scooch into Donald Trump territory.
Yeah.
In 2015, 5 days before the Iowa caucus, Jerry Falwell Jr. shocked everybody by being the first major evangelical leader to endorse Donald Trump. Right. And I remember leading up to that, people assumed he was going to endorse Ted Cruz because Ted Cruz at that point was kind of, people were saying this seems the obvious evangelical choice.
This is important. I think that we forget how many like evangelical Christians and Baptists were on the 2015 the primaries. There were so many candidates that were way more Christian than Donald Trump. So yes, it was. I remember it clearly, thinking, wait, the guy who's running Liberty University doesn't endorse Ted Cruz, even Marco Rubio, John Kasich, but goes after Trump. Like, that makes no sense to me. It was pretty shocking.
Yeah, no, it was shocking. I remember being shocked by it too, because even though Jerry Falwell Jr. we keep saying Jr., even though he has never claimed to be this religious leader, he is Jerry Falwell Jr. Like, you cannot hear his name without thinking about Jerry Falwell and the weight
right.
of what that name means. Like, I mean, his dad, whether he likes it or not, had a very religious and Christian nationalist legacy.
Well,
and his dad was one of the main people to call out Bill Clinton for his scandals and affairs, and Jerry Falwell. I remember I grew up, Jerry Falwell Sr. was a household name in my house growing up. I remember seeing him on TV all the time, and he would talk about how character mattered and you needed someone righteous in the White House. So to have Jerry Falwell Sr.'s own son, who shares the same name, suddenly come out and endorse Donald Trump, who has never been lacking in scandals.
Yep.
And literally has had a reputation of being a playboy and an adulterer. And this was before he ever even ran. Like, being a moral person was never something that Donald Trump was known for. And for him to come out and endorse, having someone with the name Jerry Falwell endorse Donald Trump was huge.
President of Liberty University endorses Trump. I'm sorry, what? What? Yeah. The biggest Christian college in the world? That guy? The guy who is supposed to endorse and support these Christian values that they hold students to? Endorsing a guy who is saying things that sound completely anti that? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. I have a clip of him on Anderson Cooper if you want to play that, so people can kind of hear just how he would justify it, because obviously a lot of people in the media were also bewildered by this decision.
Yeah.
Jerry, thanks so much for being with us. When you hear Donald Trump refer to Elizabeth Warren as Pocahontas, when he calls Secretary Clinton a lowlife, do you take issue with that at all? Is that a Christian thing to do, in your opinion?
Well, I'm president of a university. We have a Division I football team, and we have lots of players who might have relatives or friends on opposing teams, but when the whistle blows, it's every man for himself. And I think politics is the same way. And I think it's the way the game is played. It's a blood sport, and I wouldn't expect anything less from somebody who wants to win the presidency.
I know you said that people should stop trying to choose political leaders who they believe are the most godly, because only God knows people's hearts.
What a jump.
What about judging candidates according to their actions? I mean, isn't that really the only way to assess who a candidate is, what they actually believe in?
No, I think the way to assess a candidate is their experience. I think with Donald Trump, his experience and success in the private sector is one of the reasons I chose to support him, because I've been president. Before that, I was general counsel of a university that was in financial trouble in the 80s and 90s, and we brought in the best experts to make it the most prosperous university in the country now, one of the most prosperous, I should say. And it's, I think the country needs the same type of, I think the country needs a doctor who has the cure for America's ills. I think we're at a turning point. I think we could lose our country if we don't choose the right president this time. And I think Donald Trump is the man for this point in history.
I wonder what you worked obviously closely with your dad, who founded the Moral Majority. What do you think he would have made of Donald Trump?
I think he was roundly criticized for supporting Ronald Reagan over Jimmy Carter, who was a Southern Baptist Sunday school teacher. Ronald Reagan was a Hollywood actor who had been divorced, remarried. Everybody said my dad was an apostate for supporting somebody like Reagan, but Reagan turned out to be a much better president for issues that Christians were concerned about than Jimmy Carter was. And I think you have to look past, you can't be, we're not electing a pastor-in-chief, we're electing a commander-in-chief, and we can't expect our commander-in-chief to have the same qualities as our pastors. And I think,
well, there you go. I mean, I think that's pretty good for now. But this is, of course, a huge turnaround compared to what Franklin Graham said about Bill Clinton, right? When Bill Clinton had the affair in the White House, April, you and I would argue it wasn't even an affair, because how could it be consensual with that power dynamic at play? But when that happened, Franklin Graham rightfully said that how can we trust someone to lead the nation when they do this kind of behavior in private, and that private actions need to match public attitude and public integrity. And to see within 2 decades, less than that, a complete turnaround to, well, listen, we just need a commander-in-chief, not a pastor-in-chief, and whoever's most qualified to justify Trump's behavior which of course this is in 2015, 2016. So we all know what has happened since, how much worse things have gotten. It's really telling.
And I don't know if Jerry Jr. is the first one to say we're electing a president, not a pastor, but it wouldn't surprise me if this interview and him saying like his way of justification was the trickle down that gave your everyday church-going Christian the justification to vote for Donald Trump. Because I can't tell you, I mean, I heard that countless times in the lead up to the 2016 election when I was a never Trump. I was a Republican, but I was an outspoken never Trumper. I did not understand how we could vote for him. And that was one of the main things. It was, we're voting for a president, not a pastor, you know, maybe only tied with but her emails.
Right.
You know.
Right. Yes, exactly. I mean, I think it does go to show how influential these leaders really are. I mean, Falwell created that narrative on that interview with Anderson Cooper, and it became what Matthew Taylor calls is a prophetic meme, right? It's this line that gets spread around evangelicalism as justification for this behavior, right? So, yeah, it's a good reminder that there really isn't much of a objective moral foundation for these people. They're always going to look at whatever gives them access to power and control. And Trump, knowing that, really campaigned strongly on that narrative, right? That, hey, as president, I will make Christianity great again. I will protect Christianity. And it worked, frankly.
Yeah. Well, and you heard Jerry Jr. there give his reasons for Donald Trump. You know, he was a real estate developer and a populist, and he kind of gave more practical reasons for voting for him. It was interesting in that Vanity Fair article that I read, the journalist who wrote it said that he wondered if one of the reasons Jerry Jr. endorsed Trump too was just to continue his rebellion against evangelical fundamentalism and rules. And there's a piece of me that's like, I mean, maybe still got that rebellious PK in there. Yep. I don't know. So I don't know when we want to get to the scandal, because there's a scandal that's going on behind the scenes during all of this. But before we get to that, I do want to show, and so Jerry told Fox News in December of 2015, and this is wild to me, quote, "Trump reminds me so much of my father. In my opinion, Donald Trump lives a life of loving and helping others as Jesus taught."
Wow.
And that was what he said at Liberty University as he was introducing Trump not long before the Iowa caucuses in 2015. So
shocking.
Yeah. And then in the Access Hollywood tape came out in October of 2016. I don't know if you remember that.
How can I forget?
And Jerry told a radio interviewer in response to this, quote, "We're never going to have a perfect candidate unless Jesus Christ is on the ballot," which further gave cover for evangelicals to excuse Trump's absolutely immoral behavior. I mean, I remember when that Access Hollywood tape came out, I thought for sure, that's it. Christian 100%. Can't vote for him now. There's no way. There's no way.
When the tape came out, I thought this is it. I got giddy for a minute. Maybe we'll do a third party. Maybe evangelicals are going to think about, actually doing something completely different. The fact that it did nothing to impact support. I mean, Jerry also said when this came out, he said, "I think this whole videotape thing was planned. I think it was timed. I think it might have even been a conspiracy among the establishment Republicans who've known about it for weeks and who tried to do it to the maximum." Who tried to time it to do the maximum damage to Donald Trump. So the spin cycle comes out. This is an attack. I mean, it very much is Trump, isn't it? Isn't this how Trump responds to things like this? Oh, it's someone else's fault. It's the media. It's the establishment. It's the deep state. And we see how these seeds are being planted early on with that kind of rhetoric. Again, no accountability, it's so weird hearing conservatives talk about about personal responsibility and not being a victim and taking ownership over your life and taking responsibility for your actions. And then when Trump does all this stuff, including this leaked Hollywood Access tape, I think it was someone else. It was just timed to smear him. It wasn't really his fault. He didn't really mean it. It was just locker room talk. We need a commander-in-chief, not a pastor-in-chief. Suddenly, there's no responsibility taken. There's no accountability. Yeah. Suddenly, he is a victim, right? It's fascinating to watch the machine get into action to maintain the person that they want to be elected. And yeah, I mean, I'll never forget when that tape came out and hearing it, and then being absolutely shell-shocked that people who raised me in Sunday school were telling me I was crazy and a liberal. I didn't endorse Hillary. I voted third party in that election. I was just saying, how can we support Trump? Somehow that made me a flaming liberal automatically. Yet, if me and my girlfriend were caught alone in a room doing nothing, that could have impacted my ability to serve on the worship team at church. That's how strict my standards were for sexual purity. And yet this guy can literally brag about grabbing women, and he's the commander-in-chief that we have to vote for? Give me a break. It's wild.
I think this would be a good time to also mention that in 2021, Liberty University, there were a group of survivors of sexual assault who filed a lawsuit against Liberty, saying that it ignored reports while enforcing a code of conduct known as the Liberty Way. And then in 2024, the federal government under the Biden administration penalized Liberty $16 million for creating a culture where students were afraid to report sexual violence. And the reason for that being is because when you grow up in purity culture, you are taught that you become damaged goods once you have sex. Consent does not matter. Like you're never taught the importance of consent. You're never taught about choice. It's just once you have sex, you are then damaged goods. And so that created this culture of and it's not just Liberty University. This exists in places that are very steeped in purity culture too, where women won't come forward when they are assaulted, or whoever it is, won't come forward when they're assaulted because that shows as a stain on them. Also, as somehow
and they can get in trouble.
Yeah, you would get in trouble because someone assaulted you or SA'd you, like that. Absolutely. Like you're both equal parties because it takes two, regardless of whether or not you chose that. So you also are just enforcing a environment that gives cover for abusers.
100%. Yeah.
So that's just an interesting tidbit to know, like behind the scenes, that was the culture that was happening at Liberty University while he's going on the record defending a man for bragging about assaulting women.
Yep.
So, okay. I do think.
Speaking of purity culture.
Another thing that is happening in the background of this, which I guess had happened years before.
2012, 2014-ish, I think, something like that, 2-year stint.
Yeah. So, okay. So the Times reports that the Trump and Falwells relationship dates back to September of 2012. When Trump gives a speech at Liberty. So that's like initial introduction.
Yep.
So, and this story is a little bit he said, she said, because there are opposing narratives depending on who you ask. But, and there's a whole documentary called God Forbid on Hulu that goes into the details of this scandal. And it is a scandal.
And there's also a whole podcast on it too. There's many different places detailing all the details. Yeah.
Yes. So basically, a former Miami pool boy named John Carlo Granda has claimed that he had a almost 7-year affair with Becky Falwell. So Jerry Falwell Jr.'s wife. Now, John Carlo says that Jerry was aware of it the whole time, and he claims that sometimes would even watch.
Yep.
Jerry and Becky maintain that's not true, and it was just Becky having an affair, and that Jerry didn't know about it and became aware of it like after the like outside, like was not involved, was not a fan.
Right.
So those are the competing narratives. But they did go into business together at one point by buying, what did they buy? Some real estate.
Yeah, they bought a youth hostel, or it was a hostel in Miami, which ironically would host parties for queer people as well. So it was kind of ironic that the president of Liberty University was investing in such a place of debauchery. I mean, according to him, right? This guy is publicly saying how all these issues in America are the problem, why Donald Trump has to come in and fix it. But meanwhile, he's investing in a property with Giancarlo, at least allegedly, that would host parties that, I'll just say we're not part of the Liberty way. We'll just put it that way.
Not in the code of conduct.
Right. Yeah.
So and so then, Jerry claims that Granda kind of almost like extorted his investment into this real estate thing as a way to be quiet about the affair.
Right.
That's the
alleged.
Alleged. He said, she said situation. But in 2015, so the same year that Jerry Jr. endorses Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm.
Just so we
Keep
are
that
in
in
the
mind.
same timeline. Yeah.
Right.
In 2015, they get sued by two men who were involved in this real estate situation. And then I think they claimed they had some racy photos of Becky. That they were going to, go public.
They were going to release.
Yeah, who knows?
Yeah.
Jerry and Becky were worried about these going public. So they called Michael Cohen. And just a refresher on who that is, he was Donald Trump's lawyer. And a lot of people would call him Donald Trump's fixer. Like he made problems go away.
Yep.
So they involve Michael Cohen because they want to get these pictures to go away. And in Michael Cohen's own memoir book, he writes about this. He does not explicitly say that him getting rid of the photos is why Jerry endorsed Trump.
Right.
So it's not explicit, but he does say, quote,
Hints.
in good time, I would call in this favor, not for me, but for the boss at a crucial moment on his journey to the presidency.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, just to recap this kind of succinctly, right? The allegation is that Jerry Falwell and his wife, Becky, had an alternate sexual lifestyle at times, and there was a pool boy involved where the pool boy and Becky allegedly would have sex and Jerry would allegedly watch. And that was going on for a long time. And they kind of got intermingled and they got into investments together and all this other stuff. And again, there are other documentaries that go into all the details that you can look into. That's not really what the focus is of this piece. And through a lawsuit, it turns out that there was some racy photos of Becky that were being threatened to come out. And they call Trump's fixer, Michael Cohen, who made those photos go away. And Cohen says, I would later call in a favor, though, for what I did for them. And it just happens to line up around the time that, Cohen's client, Trump, decides to run for president. And what do you know? The president of the largest Christian university in America, maybe even in the world, with tons of political power and financial power, endorses not the logical choice, according to even his own values or the college's values, but endorses a man who makes absolutely no sense. I wonder. Allegedly. This is all alleged, to be clear. I'm not making any emphatic accusations. I'm just saying, it feels like one of those where there's smoke, there's fire kind of things, where it's like, can I prove it? No. Is it alleged? Yes. Is it highly sus? Absolutely. And I wanted to mention this briefly, April. We are not here to judge Jerry Falwell and Becky's bedroom lifestyle choices. If adults are involved and it's consensual, it is what it is. What makes it so frustrating is the hypocrisy of what these people advocate for. The politicians that they're voting in that want to harm queer people, right? That want to do things to people who wouldn't line up with like the biblical worldview and biblical understanding of sexuality. Meanwhile, Jerry and his wife are allegedly participating in something that has absolutely no place in the evangelical purity culture psyche, So it's just that part's very frustrating to witness.
That part is definitely frustrating to witness. But what didn't come out until a few years later. I think it might have been around 2020, because that's when Jerry Falwell Jr. resigns from Liberty University in 2020.
Can I tell you a funny story?
Yeah.
So I shared there was a big magazine piece. I forgot which publisher, but came out with this whole story about the pool boy and stuff. And I shared it on my Facebook, and it has tons of receipts in the article. And my former senior pastor commented under, "It's a sin to gossip." I was like, I don't think I'm gossiping. I think this has like a lot of receipts behind it. But like, yeah, I remember that moment when this all came out and I shared it. And my former senior pastor said I was gossiping for sharing the article. So interesting.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, that falls in line with how Jerry talks about how he endorsed Donald Trump. Hold on. Did I send you that do you have that video where he says, we all paid the price?
I think I did. Yeah. Is this one here?
So Jerry, in typical evangelical fashion, I don't know if that's the one or not. No, that's not it.
That's not it?
No, I don't know what that one is. You could play that one.
This is Jerry Falwell Jr. explaining Trump's appeal for evangelicals. I think it's actually worth listening to.
Okay, yeah, we can watch it.
Jerry Falwell Jr. goes on the record. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, and congratulations on 3,500 shows, Greta.
Thank you very much.
I guess you needed a little practice before you had me. I guess you needed a little practice before you had me on.
Very well. Well, I've had your father on when I didn't have that practice. So anyway, nice to have you, sir. All right. Why do you think? Why is it that Donald Trump is doing so much better with the evangelical vote than Senator Ted Cruz?
Because I think evangelicals are tired of being betrayed. I think Tea Party conservatives are tired of being betrayed by politicians who promised the world over the last few decades. And I think the song from 1971 by The Who, "Won't Get Fooled Again," is very pertinent in this situation. I think that's how a lot of evangelicals feel. We don't want to get fooled again, so we're no longer going to go with career politicians. I'm looking for somebody who has made a payroll. I spent most of my adult life helping my father as general counsel here at Liberty, helping make payroll, trying to find money over the weekend to cover the checks that went out on the Friday before. And so I know what it takes to make a payroll. I know how it feels to have your employees' livelihood depend on you coming up with the money. Donald Trump has done that over and over and over. Nobody else on that debate stage has made a payroll. They've been employees, with the exception of maybe Carly Fiorina, but Donald was the one that rose to the top. And it's just something that I feel strongly. I think this time evangelicals are looking at different issues than they have in the past because they're trying to save the country. I think the security of the country, the economy, maybe next time they'll be looking at social issues more like they did in the past. But I think this time I heard a very prominent pastor who is a friend of yours, by the way, Greta, tell me this just this week, that if we don't save the country, then abortion, traditional marriage, all those social issues are going to be a moot point. We've got to save the country first. And I believe, and many evangelicals, a majority of evangelicals believe that Donald Trump is best equipped to save the country.
There you go. So, I mean, his whole point was, and this actually kind of lines up with who he is, right? Because we're going to read later on that he comes out in, like, I think 2022 or 2020 saying, I was never really a Christian. I was, never really was all in on that side of things. But his argument is that, we have to save the country. So it seems like it was purely pragmatic for a lot of white evangelicals at the time, what was kind of his take on it. Very interesting.
And I think it's important to note, too, that Donald Trump, from his policies and how he's spoken since 2015, has moved very right. Because when he first was running in 2016, I mean, I remember they sold MAGA Pride merch.
Yeah.
At one point, and like he's so anti-queer at this point. I mean, he used to brag about having a gay cabinet member as to show that he was progressive in that way. And to now, exactly, he's like in this photo here, he's holding up a pride flag that says LGBT for Trump. The T is there.
Yep. Yep.
So he's moved even further right. And I do think, I think there's a little bit of Donald Trump kind of patting the back of Christian nationalists because they gave him so much power and they gave him the White House. I think there's a little tit for tat going on.
There's definitely a symbiotic relationship happening, right? Where it's like, okay, I'm gonna respond to you, you're gonna respond to me, we're gonna keep kind of snowballing this thing. And yeah, you're right. I think he definitely has moved clearly farther and farther to the right. Or maybe we can say what he's thought has been less and less filtered over the past few years. So
well, and I still don't believe that Donald Trump actually has any like beliefs himself. I think he will perpetuate whatever narrative he needs to protect and promote Donald Trump.
100%. I mean that's all he believes emphatically is him, himself, and I are the most important people on the earth.
So before you play the video of the Jerry Jr. interview from 2024, where he's talking in hindsight. So let's just do a little bit of, actually, no, before we get to this, sorry, there's a lot here. We need to play the 2 Corinthians clip.
Oh, I had that.
Yeah. It's in the image on the title. So we've got to show it. So this was one of Trump's early gaffes on Christianity that was so clear that this man does not know much about evangelical culture whatsoever. This one, and then the interview he gave, I think it was in Iowa, where he said he's never asked God for forgiveness. Were 2 things where I was like, surely that my fellow Christians are going to know that this man is just conning us.
He's a hack.
We're going to protect Christianity, and I can say that. I don't have to be politically correct or...
By the way, but really quick, I just have to say, this is, I think, 2015, 2016, right before he got elected. And he's saying we have to protect Christianity at the world's largest Christian university.
Yeah.
Like, what is there to protect? You guys are thriving. It's $1 billion+ institution with thousands of students that is shaping the culture. And they're applauding this narrative that Trump's giving them, which they've heard their whole life, that Christianity is under attack. Like, bro, it's not. Like, in America, it's not. But I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah. This was in January. You know, context. This was in January of 2016.
Thank you.
And I asked Jerry and I asked some of the folks, because I hear this is a major theme right here, but 2 Corinthians, right? 2 Corinthians 3:17. That's the whole ball game. Where the Spirit of the Lord, right? Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. And here there is Liberty College, but Liberty University. But
I can't believe he said that. I can't believe that he actually twisted God's word, right, and made it about liberty, and people applauded that. And here's why I say that, because I
can believe it.
Well, I was taught that you don't add to God's word, you don't twist God's word, that God's word is sacred, that it is perfect, and that we don't misuse it. We don't take God's name in vain. And to watch this man do that and watch them applaud, again, demonstrates how, well, if it's in our self-interest, then it's okay if he does that. Because we all know, if that was, at the time, was a Clinton, if it was Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden who said that and did the same idea to a different group, maybe the ACLU or Planned Parenthood, oh my God, he's twisting the scripture. He hates the Bible. But because their guy did it, no, it's all good, man. It's hilarious.
I think that was one of the more shocking things, that I saw the same people that I grew up with who were so fundamentalist, right? They were such rule followers, and I would get in trouble for saying, "Oh my gosh," because it sounded like I wanted to say, because I really wanted to say, "Oh my God," which was taking God's name in vain.
Right. I couldn't say shoot. Too close.
Right. And even like, dang it, like, well, we know what you really want to say. God knows your heart. Like, and like the little the stupid rules that I had to follow to be a good Christian. And then Donald Trump comes in and they're like, I mean, and I call it out, and they are like, well, you're being too fundamentalist.
Right. No one's perfect, April. We're all sinners.
Yeah. I'm like, what?
Why wasn't that ever applied to me?
Where was the grace for me?
Yeah. You're right. We are all sinners, which is why I barely made it to the wedding bed, because I'm a sinner. It's like, you know what I'm saying, though? It's like, yes, where was that grace for me as a human being? Oh God!
Right, when I was actually trying,
religion.
when we were actually trying to do good and follow all the right rules and do all of the right things because we wanted to follow God, and like the grace was lacking. And then Donald Trump, who clearly is not trying to follow God at all, and if anything, like doesn't even do his research. I mean, they're like, "What's your favorite Bible verse?" And he's like, "Oh, they're all great.
They're all
Can't
great."
Okay. Can't even name one. And they're like,
literally,
"Oh well." Yeah.
He desecrates the Christian tradition. Like, in all seriousness, the man mocks God. Like, he makes a mockery of Christianity all the time. And these people eat it up. They eat it up and they go, "We're so back." God, like, I don't know what happens when we die, but if there is a judgment at the end of all days and God's there, I'm looking forward to that moment, because my gosh, how do you stomach how this all unfolded in the name of the Christian God? This isn't because of atheism or because of Buddhism or because of Islam. This is because of in particular, white Protestant, Catholic, and evangelical Christians saying, this is how God would want our nation to be governed, like this, by this man. So that's unreal. Anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, so where are we in the story? Yeah,
so
sorry, we got sidetracked.
We're gonna get caught up here. There is an interview that I want to play in a few minutes of Jerry Jr. It's an interview from 2024 where he talks about he goes the persecution complex route, because of course he does. After the scandal becomes public knowledge, Jerry Falwell resigns from Liberty University in 2020. And then shortly after that, Liberty actually launched an investigation into his conduct at the university.
Wait. Yeah. We got to show the picture of why he resigned.
Was this the picture? Okay.
Yeah. This was not this one. This was the infamous photo.
Was that, well, when did the pool boy stuff come out?
Well,
was it around the same time?
Yeah, he was still around when the pool boy stuff came out, I think he resigned after this. Like, there was all this speculation.
This was the nail in the coffin.
This was the nail in the coffin where his team was like, okay, too far, Jerry. And for those watching, it's him with another woman. Both of their pants are unzipped, and he's holding a glass of, it looks like it could be wine. It's black, the drink, or very dark. And the caption reads, "More vacation shots. Lots of good friends visited us on the yacht. I promise that's just black water in my glass. It was a prop only." And that was the moment where his board was like, "Yeah, this guy's got to go." Honestly, there was a lot of things happening behind the scenes that Falwell was doing. There was a lot of controversy he was making online with some of his statements about COVID. Also, there was again another alleged rumor that Becky was sleeping with a college student, one of like their son's friends. So like there was a lot of stuff happening behind the scenes, allegedly. And then I think that when this photo came out, it was the nail in the coffin for the board of directors and for the people in charge at Liberty who were like, this guy's got to go.
Well, I will say NBC News article in August of 2020, the headline says, Jerry Falwell Jr. resigns as Liberty University president after accusations that he participated in a partner's affair with his wife.
Oh, maybe my talent must be messed up. Okay. That must
well,
be
hold
it.
on. Let me figure out when did this picture come out? Because I think it might have been after. Hold on. Jerry Jr. Unzipped photo.
Oh, God.
You know what? This is August of 2020. So this is around the same time.
Yep.
So
okay, according to NPR, days after Falwell receives criticism for posting a photo online that showed him with his pants unzipped, he went on indefinite leave from Liberty University. So it kind of all happened together.
Yeah, I think, and that people might have been saying, because obviously he would have been aware of this happening behind the scenes before it went public.
Totally.
And some people are saying this was kind of him in a way, like destroying himself, like going to a very dark place and just not caring anymore.
Yeah, like I'm out.
Yeah, just.
By the way, I will say, and I remember being on Twitter a lot when all of this was going down. Very little outcry from white evangelical leaders about this.
Yeah.
A very little outcry. They were too busy talking about Drag Queen Story Hour to talk about their own president of Liberty University living a lifestyle that was completely at odds with their own moral teachings, so-called, and what they were advocating for the country to be doing. Not really much from them.
Yeah, and I do think that Jerry at one point made a quote too where he was like, I never wanted to be a religious leader. Like after the fact, when this all came out.
So
I guess that is fair. He can't help that he has that name. But also, when he was endorsing Donald Trump, he was definitely using Christianese language to do so.
So this is according to Americans United, March 1st, 2022. Falwell tells magazine he rejects Fowler's views of evangelical Christianity. Quote, because of my last name, people think I'm a religious person, but I'm not. My goal was to make them realize I was not my dad. So, I mean, he comes out after all of this, right? After he endorses Trump, talks about values and about, why we need Trump to come in and fix the country. After he takes millions of dollars from Liberty University as the president. Turns out, never really his thing anyway. He was never really a believer, guys. It's all good. But the grift worked, right? The grift worked because in evangelicalism, if you say the right beliefs, you're fine. This is how Matt Gaetz can have credible accusations of him sex trafficking minors and still speak at Turning Point USA events because he says the right beliefs. He says the right things. I think Falwell saw that. I think Falwell saw that if he just said the right things, if he endorsed the right people, if he said, the right pieces of propaganda and rhetoric, he could do whatever he wanted behind the scenes. He could drink if he wanted to. Him and his wife could allegedly participate in different kinds of sexual activity that would be frowned upon. They could live a life of lavishness. They could use Liberty's personal jet or a private jet as a personal vehicle, which they did many times. Like, just say the right things, I'm going to be okay. And it turns out that he never believed all along. And again, white evangelicalism as a whole is never going to be like, wow, where did we go wrong? How did that man become the president of the largest Christian university advocating for a very strict ethic of speech, of language, of sexual orientation, etc.? But they're not going to do that.
Yeah, which in hindsight makes sense why he was okay endorsing Donald Trump if he's not, as true of a believer as his dad was. Like, I don't know if he's actually. More sense. Yeah, he hasn't actually come out and say he's not Christian. I would imagine he still identifies that way, but not religious, because there is a difference in this world of being religious and being Christian. And in fact, most evangelicals would say they're not religious because it's not religion; it's about a relationship.
Yeah.
Just some little tidbits.
It's weird. He says nothing in history has done more to turn people away from Christianity than organized religion. The religious elite has got this idea that somehow their sins aren't as bad as everyone else's. That is like, yes, Jerry, exactly. Like, do you hear yourself?
So close. He's so close.
So close, dude. Yes.
So he resigns in 2020. Liberty then launches an investigation into his conduct while he was at the university. Jerry then sues the university for defamation, but then he dropped it months later. Then in 2021, Liberty sued Jerry Jr., arguing that he breached his contract. In 2023, Jerry Jr. filed two separate claims, one over his retirement package and then the other against the university for how it used his dad's image, Jerry Falwell Sr. And then during this dispute, Jerry and Becky were both barred from entering Liberty University's campus. Then in July of 2024, so last summer, both parties announced that they were dropping their claims. And then Jerry and Becky were allowed to come back on campus. And I think Jerry even spoke at one of their chapels or something. But to this date, Jerry no longer works for Liberty. His brother, Jonathan, is now the chancellor at Liberty and is still the pastor of Thomas Road Baptist Church, as he's been since his dad passed away. So interesting, though, just recently, in the month of May of 2025, the news broke that Liberty University paid Falwell $5.5 million to settle their lawsuits.
Yep.
And that is in addition to almost $9.7 million he already received as part of his retirement package.
God, that must be nice. Imagine getting a $9.7 million retirement package.
I know. I know.
And they say we deconstructed because it was sexy and lucrative. No. Going into evangelical Christian higher ed seems the lucrative option at this point.
Yeah. But I think to put the cherry on top of this whole thing,
yeah,
Jerry Jr. in November of 2024, so right after the election of Donald Trump, or right, let me see. I'm gonna get the exact date on this. This would have been November. Come back. Show me the date. November 7th. So yeah,
okay.
like literally right around the election. He does this interview where he talks about in hindsight supporting Donald Trump and how he feels about it. So just listen to what he says about it after all of this has transpired.
We all paid the price for supporting him. I mean, I've probably been lied about more in the last 4 years than, or on a smaller scale, of course, than Donald Trump. But I've been lied about in ways that are similar to what he's had to endure.
And you attribute that to your support for Donald Trump?
Never Trump organizations like the Lincoln Project, who are former Republicans who have switched over, like the Liz Cheney type, Mitt Romney, George Bush type, who've switched over and they would rather vote for a Democrat than for Donald Trump. When I saw key people in his administration being arrested and put in jail, I knew that my day was coming.
So in a lot of ways, do you feel like supporting Trump was sort of the beginning of your downfall at Liberty University?
There's no question.
So he attributes all the bad things that have happened to him because he supported Donald Trump and then was persecuted.
Yeah.
Because of that.
Yeah,
Not because he did anything.
Well, again, I mean, it's when I think $7. Wow. When I think $9.7 million retirement package, I think persecution too. So that makes sense.
Yeah.
Poor guy. Woohoo. Boo-hoo.
I know.
Where's the accountability?
The lesson is never learned. The lesson is never learned. It's so
he's a victim. He's a victim. He'll preach self-reliance. He'll preach pick yourself up by your own bootstraps. He'll preach why the big bad government shouldn't help anyone in need because that's the nanny state, and that the left is a bunch of victim complaining crybabies. And here he is. Yep, not my fault. Yeah, just my supporting Trump was the beginning of the downfall, and watching people lie about me incessantly. It's like, dude, take some responsibility for your actions. Take some responsibility. Yeah. Frustrating as hell. Yeah. So I think
anyway, I do think. Yeah. What?
Well, I was gonna say he's out of the limelight now, mostly. Besides, popping up here and there.
Yeah, he's mostly living privately with Becky, and they're still together.
That's good. Yeah, happy for him.
Yeah.
There is. Can I just say there is a trail of bodies behind Trump. Michael Cohen is in jail. Rudy
is he
Giuliani.
Still in jail?
He might be out now, but he served like 3 years for
he definitely went to jail.
Yeah, for fraud and stuff. Rudy Giuliani got disbarred, and I still get his emails. He's begging for money every day. Jerry Falwell and a whole other list of people that come alongside Trump and just get thrown to the side the second they're no longer useful. And yet people still come around him and say, that's my guy. Marco Rubio's next. I mean, look at Marco Rubio's trajectory from a couple of years ago. Trump's the biggest con man. This is ridiculous. He shouldn't be trusted, to literally sitting in, I guess, the Oval Office, watching Trump berate Ukraine's president in defense of Putin, and Marco Rubio is just sitting there stonewalled. Like, wow, Marco, what a trajectory you've been on.
You could see him slowly losing his soul as he sat there, like in his
eyes. Yeah. Like, how did I? Almost like his whole life is flashing in front of his very face, and he's like, how did I get here? How did I get here in this moment? How many little missteps of compromise did I make to end up in this moment right now? Yeah, good question.
Yeah, well, and I think that's a fair critique, that just because you are in the inner circle with Donald Trump does not mean you're not expendable. You are absolutely expendable. The only one who is not in that administration is Donald Trump.
100%. Yeah.
So.
Well, now we know. Now we have a more complete picture of the Falwell legacy and its impact on politics. Great job, April. Great research on that. That was awesome.
Yeah, well, I do think, Jerry Jr., we need to also emphasize, he was the first evangelical leader to endorse Donald Trump. He gave evangelicals permission to support Donald Trump. if he doesn't support Donald Trump, I don't know if Trump wins.
Yep.
Honestly, like I think he is one of the more responsible people for this rise of Christian nationalism, and
him and Paula White, man, they were like two sides of the coin just coming together to get both of their sides to endorse the same person, and they created quite the perfect storm.
But it also just shows too, his dad paved the way. His dad, Jerry Falwell Sr., like this goes back decades. Like Donald Trump was not created in a vacuum.
Right.
The MAGA movement was not created in a vacuum. Like there's so many layers. And I think it's important that we understand how this happened historically and currently. And because once you know a problem and can recognize a problem, then you can start dismantling it. So
that's why we're doing
the point
these
of these deep dives.
Yeah.
To just learn, like, how did we get here? And
right.
Yeah.
And the reality is it's complicated. And I think that as humans, we want simple answers to complex problems. There's a lot of ingredients here, right? Yes, Paula White. Yes, Jerry Falwell. Yes, Jerry Falwell Jr. Like there's all these different players that have been not even intentionally working together, but just kind of coalescing around each other in the same cultural space, right? Tilling the soil and planting seeds that eventually have given us the tree of Trumpism and MAGA, etc. And so these deep dives are designed to help you get a wider view of what's going on. So when you hear things, you know where they're coming from, because not everything comes from the same root. You know, the Seven Mountain Mandate might come from more charismatic spaces, but this, you know, commander-in-chief, pastor-in-chief rhetoric, or, you know, that real pragmatism, right, of like, he's just a good businessman, that really comes from this side of things often. And it's good to know where they come from so you can better combat it.
That's right. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Too Fast, 2 Corinthians.
Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, friends. Talk to y'all later.
Yep. Bye.